And so, my dear ones, welcome and welcome into Super Bowl Sunday. I know everybody's thinking about all those wonderful barbecues, etc. But here we are, and in this month we are called and invited to look at our self-awareness and see whether or not our self-awareness is adequate for us in order to live a very full and wondrous life. And today in particular, we're asked to take a look at what religion is as a whole community. And so I always like to look things up in the dictionary, and there are all kinds of definitions of religion, but mainly you get that it is a respect for the gods, it is a regard for the sacred, it is something that binds us in sort of obligation. It is something that has to do with our relationship between humanity and divinity and so on. So look it all up because it's fascinating to do that. For me, religion for a long, long time has always equaled relationship. Relationship with all of life, relationship with this thing called God, with God in many manifested forms in all of God's creation, and points to whether or not I'm in a good relationship with that sense and sensibility. Ernest Holmes says that religion, for him, religion is the impulsion to love. It's the impulsion to love. And to love is to live. Love is life. Life is love. And there's not one without the other. It's all one expression. But he stresses that throughout all of his writings, he's stressing the importance and the power of love. Love, love, love. It's all about love. He says the greatest practitioners are the ones who love the most, the ones who love the most. And so we look at our dear, wonderful Ernest Holmes, the founder of our organization, and we learn that he has always been a very inquisitive young man and always very interested in how life works. Hated school, didn't like school, left school at 15, went into the world of business, and spent all his free time in the library studying everything he could study with regard to understanding who we are and what life is all about. And so he had a genius for that and was able to, in the studying of the religions and the philosophies and the sciences and so on, he could see the common thread in it all. So he was able to extrapolate from all the common truth, common knowledge, and present it to us eventually as science of mind and spirit. And he was always seeking, always searching until he wasn't, until he found what he was looking for. And the way our movement started out was that he, in conversations with his friends, one of his friends invited him to come to his home and speak to a group. And he did, and that was the beginning of the movement called Science of Mind. And so as far as religion is concerned, the good doctor never had any idea of creating a new religion. And so he would only consider us to be a religion in a certain sense. And that would be if we were to call ourselves a religion, it would have to be a religion that included everybody and left no one out of that inclusion, that all would be included in that. He says that we are a teaching practice is what we are. We're a teaching order, a practicing order, and that's what we are. And in the beginning, we had people decided that he needed to organize because his interest was people's interest in him was expanding, and he was becoming a big name. And so they said, you must organize. So we were organized into chapters in the beginning. Then we moved from chapters to churches, and from churches now back to centers. And that's where we are today. And so he said to his friend, George Bendel, who was a close friend of his for the last 3 years of his life. And one day he said to him, George, I only talk about and write about 3 things. And the 3 things that I talk about are as follows. And he didn't say, and the 3 things I talk about are as follows, but this is what his 3 things were. There's only God, common to us all, and God in all, working and moving through all. And then he said there's a universe that with mathematical regularity responds to our spontaneous thought all the time. And the next thing he shared was, the 11th commandment of theology is, you shall love each other as I have loved you. You shall love each other as I have loved you. So his whole push was on the idea that we all come into the sense and sensibility about ourselves as the true essence that we are, and not what many religions would have us believe, that we are wretched sinners, and that we have to find salvation, and that we have to crawl back from our wickedness and sinfulness and so on and so forth, and try and reach that union with a God who is very far away and very remote. And he said, no, we are not that. We are not on a mission of sadness, the mission of saving souls, the mission of salvation. No, that's not what we are. He said, no, quite the contrary. What we are a group of people who are so self-aware, who are so secure in their relationship with the source of their being, with the one power, the one presence, the one infinite intelligence, the one mind, that we are into celebration and glorification of the joy, the delight, and the grace that lives within us, to the point that we sing and we sing and we sing. That's what we're about. So what we are here to do is always to affirm a truth that sets us free. A truth that sets us free from all the nonsense and all the suspicion and all of the negation and all of the angst and all of the fear that our human egoic mind would keep us in and keep us bound to. We are here to move into the greater sense of ourselves, the deeper sense of ourselves, and acknowledge the inner truth of ourselves, that God so loved the world that God embodied God's self in the form of you and in the form of me. God so loved the world that God embodied God's self in the form of you and in the form of me, as its image, as its likeness, with its ability and with its capacity to be all that we desire ourselves to be, know ourselves to be, own ourselves to be, claim ourselves to be, and become one with it. But the word embody is the most important word. God so loved the world that God embodied God's own essence into you and into me, so that you and I could know ourselves as the God I am. The God I am, the God I am. Say it. The God I am. The God I am. Louder. The God I am. Louder. The God I am. Do you feel the energy? You feel the energy. Now that is what you and I can uncover and rediscover about ourselves. That we're not the miserable wretches, and we're not those miserable sinners. We're not the worms of the earth and whatever else some of us have been led to believe. We're far from that. And that for a religion to be anyway true, if you think in terms of religion as a relationship with source, it's going to glorify and celebrate and honor and magnify the true essence of our being, which would come through you and come through me as life and light and love and peace and beauty and power and joy and wisdom and knowledge and understanding and goodness and kindness and compassion. Ernest Holmes says, yes, Ernest Holmes says that our religion, if we are a religion, it's a religion of love. The Dalai Lama was asked what his religion was. He says, my religion is kindness. The two marry each other. They're a side of the same coin. And that's what we are all about. That's the stuff we're made of. And again, he says, he goes on to say, that religion is whatever an individual believes religion is and whatever everybody believes a religion is. And he says, too, I don't know, you could never fully comprehend the expansiveness of Ernest Holmes. The more you read, the more you read, the more you read about him, the more he becomes this fascinating figure. He said that the day when there's no more superstition in religion, we're not focused on duality in philosophy, and the sciences have merged with the metaphysical state, then we can have perhaps one religion. And the one religion will have absorbed all the others, and that one religion will be the impulsion to love. In other words, we'll be living in a unified state. We'll be living in one race, the human race, one religion, the religion of love. And I like that idea. And you see, we may look out into the world and say that's far off. No, it's not. Nothing is far off. Why? Because everything is immediate in consciousness. And if you and I were bold enough and brave enough, audacious enough to believe that we are the glory of God, fully alive, as St. Irenaeus said in the 4th century it was, I think, we could indeed instantly know that to be so, that we are a unified family, the human family, the family of the human race, under one banner, and that one banner would be the banner of love. But how many of us trust that? How many of us really, truly believe what we say we believe? Own what we say we know? I'll go back again to the word embodiment. It's all about embodiment. I am nothing without the embodiment of the truth that sets me free. And for that embodiment to happen, you have to see it show up in me. I have to see it show up in you. And Ernest Holmes absolutely loved Plato. He thought he was the bee's knees. And Plato says, if I'm going to imitate God, I will not argue. I will not contend. I will contemplate. I will contemplate. You see, that's how we're likened unto the divine source of our being. We contemplate, but we have options. We can contemplate from our humanity, or we can contemplate from a humanity that has been absorbed by our divinity, and therefore divinely contemplate something and know it to be so. So what the challenge is for you and for me, it came to me in meditation this morning, was what is the state of my union? What is the state of our union with Source? What is the state of my union with Source? Where am I with that? Because if I am embodying the principles of science of mind, I'm not going to be anxious, I'm not going to be fearful, I'm not going to be suspicious, I'm not going to be anything that smacks of any kind of dichotomy or negation. I will not negate. I will not negate. I will not dichotomize. I will not contend or argue. I will contemplate the truth that sets me free. That's what I will do. I cannot do that. I cannot possibly do that if I am hunting with the hare and chasing with the hound. If I'm one thing here and one thing there. If I am agreeing with you who has a contrary agreement with somebody else, and then I agree with this person here, and so on and so forth. It's the games we play. Go back to Florence Scovel Shinn, The Game of Life and How to Play It. It's a beautiful book, and it shows us how indeed to be the embodiment of that which we already are. So what is there for you and for me? It's not a question of getting over my sins and paying the price of my sins and doing, restitution for my sins. What it is that this teaching calls us to is to wake up and acknowledge ourselves as that magnificent point of power through which the infinite radiates itself in all of its glory and magnificence. To wake up and own that. To let that be the focus. To let that be where our minds go. And come back again to realizing it's about consciousness, consciousness, consciousness. The second thing that Ernest Holmes says, there's a universe that mathematically, automatically responds to our spontaneous thought, and our thought is creating all of the time. Through my thought, I am attracting everything I'm thinking about constantly and continuously about. Remember last week, the magnetization of ourselves. We're a magnetic field, and in it we call into it, absorb in it, attract into it everything that is like ourselves. And the only God I can know is the God I know within myself as myself. That's the only God I can know. There is no other God. There's only the God that I can acknowledge. So Ernest Holmes says, if we want religion to be better, then we better get a better way of contemplating. We better get, he says, a better belief. If you want a better God, a better religion, get a better belief. So if you and I want to experience a better life, you and I need to get better thinking going on in our minds, better feelings going on throughout our system, so that can be responded to, and only that, and not all the other nonsense and all the other erroneous thinking and stories that we've allowed ourselves to entertain, own, and label them as ourselves. So the call today is, if you truly want to be a student of truth, if I truly want to be a student of truth, then it's not going to happen if I don't embody what I say I know, what I say I believe, what I say I own, what I say I claim. It's got to be that which seeps into every pore, seeps into every part and particle of my mental being, my emotional being, my physical being, and my spiritual being. I am not a religious being having a human experience on planet Earth. I'm a spiritual being. I'm a spiritual being having a spiritual experience on planet Earth. Or I can be, if I so pay attention to what's going on in my mind and understand not only there's a power for good in the universe greater than I am and I get to use it, the law of mind and action, but within the law of mind of action, I've got to understand that law of attraction, that law of reciprocity, the law that responds to me, that law that is wondrously available. It's one law, really. It has several aspects, but wondrously available to me for any good thing I so desire. But the question is, can I believe it? Can I actually believe that if I look at my life, especially if my life seems to be gone to hell in a handbasket right now, can I start thinking in terms of I am this wonderful point of power through which, the spirit in all its radiant magnificence can demonstrate itself? Well, maybe I can't go the whole hog there right now, but I can start somewhere. I can start somewhere. I can start having a better sense of myself. I can treat myself better by thinking better, by feeling better, by doing and being better in tiny increments. At the moment, there's a Rose McGowan, I think her name is. She's one of those actresses who's the Me Too, in the Me Too movement. And she's calling everybody to just do 10% better. to be 10% better. And it's a movement now that's taking on, be 10% better. And if our lives are so challenged at the moment that we can't go to 10%, we can start with 1% or 0.5% of an itsy-bitsy teeny percent, whatever we can do. But the thing is to do something. The thing is to move forward in some kind of a way, even if it's a tiny step, because that's the way it's going to happen for you and for me. That's the way we're going to change our thinking and change our world. That's the way we're going to wake up one day eventually and see ourselves as we are seen by our source, by our creator. Feel ourselves to be that power, that energy, and that presence, and to know ourselves as its embodiment, wherein there is no differentiation between where I begin and my source ends. My source begins and I end. That's the goal. That's why we're here. That's why we give up our time. That's why we invest in our spiritual unfoldment, because there's something in us that will not stop, that will not let us go. It's not going to stop. I mean, we go back to Meister Eckhart. The eternal is eternally begetting its only begotten Son in you. And he says it's begetting that eternality in you now. Now. God so loved the world that God embodied in you. No one else. In you, deliberately, intentionally embodied itself in you. God so loved the world that God gave itself to you by becoming you in form. Now there's something to celebrate and to glorify over, and so it is.